안녕하세요, 게임메카. 안녕하세요, I'm Rod Ferguson, studio head of the Coalition, and we make Gears 5. I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons to be excited about the Gears 5 storyline. I think part of it is understanding, like through Kate's journey to understand what's happened with her family and what her ties to the Locust are, you actually get to learn about who are the Locusts and how do they come about and like what are the origins of the Locusts, which I think Gears fans are going to love to learn that. But it's also the war coming back to Sarah. So it takes the swarm from being this sort of threat they found in the middle of the woods like you did in Gears 4, and it becomes full-scale war. And that idea of the journey you're on to start to fight that war and see how these characters are transformed and evolved through this franchise. Like that was the reason we started with characters that were younger and weren't quite so formed as sort of the previous Delta Squad, was because we wanted them to change in their journey. And I think as you play Gears 5, you'll actually see that change in them. And so who they are at the start of Gears 5 and who they are at the end of Gears 5 will be very different. When we talk about playtime, we just talk about like it's much longer than Gears 4. You know, one of the things that we've realized, you know, with having some of the largest levels we've ever built inside of our game, like, you know, we think it's something like 50 times bigger than some of our other levels, that when we do testing, we do user research testing to find out, like, okay, do we have any difficulty problems? Are there some comprehension issues? Like, just what's going on with the game? And traditionally what you would do is you'd bring in a group of people and they would play over 2 days, a Saturday and a Sunday on a weekend. And then you would get the report about, like, here's where people got stuck, or here's where people thought it was too easy, and what have you. So when we went to do our play test, we brought people in and they played for the first weekend and they didn't even get like halfway through the game, and we're like, oh no, okay, this is a much bigger game than Gears 4 was. And so we actually had to start booking people in for 2 weekends at a time. And so it took much longer to do our testing, but it showed us like we have a much bigger game. The Gears 5 story is really a two-sided story. It's the story of Kate's journey of discovery to understand her ties to the Locust, you know, the enemy from the previous trilogy. And then the other half of it is the war returns to Sarah. And so it's really about the swarm have become a big enough threat that you're understanding that you're fighting for the planet. You know, and so when you look at Marcus and JD and Del, like they're there to support Kate in understanding like how she gets through this particular, you know, this journey herself. And you see that in our E3 trailer. You see Del's like, I'll go with her. And so Del, for a lot of that journey, is with her, like together as a squad to go and try to discover her origins. And in fact, it looks like Kate and JD there's obviously some tension and stress there, whereas Marcus is supportive but has to do it sort of from afar. But JD something's happened to JD, and you see that like he's like scarred and something's wrong with his arm and he has a different attitude, and that's something you learn as you play through the game, like what happened to JD and what's going on between Kate and JD. In terms of Horde mode, like some of the really big features, probably number one is just ultimate abilities. The fact that now every character has its own ultimates. And so even if they're the same role, like Kat from Halo Reach and Del, they're both engineers, but they have different abilities. Kat has a hologram to send off a decoy so that you can distract an enemy while you're attacking it. And then Del has these 2 tracker balls that will go out and defend him while he's repairing and those sorts of things. So when you look at the progression, outside of what we call the meta progression outside of the game, like how you can progress your character with new skills and abilities, to inside the game where we have perks where you can actually change how you play within a particular session, that's a big deal for how it plays. And then on top of that, we have this new thing called power taps, which are really exciting because in the past, you would find one corner of the map and you would kind of fortify it, and you would sort of live within the corner of the map and say, okay, this is where we make our stand. We're going to hold out for 50 waves right here. But now what happens is every 10 waves, a power tap will appear somewhere in the map, and that is a possible source of more power, so you can get more perks and more fortifications, but you have to capture it and hold it. And so what it means is now every 10 waves you have this temptation of, do I move the base, do I expand the base, do I grow what we're defending? And so there's risk reward. Like, it's easier to defend a smaller space, but if you get it bigger, you can get much more power and you can become more powerful as you're playing. So it's always going to be, you know, your choice every 10 waves. Do we stay or do we grow? And that really creates an interesting dynamic when you play.